All right, so jumping into local market data from June. This what I'm looking at right now, what we're all looking at right now is single family residences from Monroe County, okay, for the month of June. And we're looking at on this right side here, you see a comparison from May of 2025 and then from June of 2024. So you get a last month comparison and a same time last year comparison. And there's kind of two stories that we could tell from this. One is we see a lot of similar aspects that we've seen already, or that we've been seeing in terms of prices are still rising here locally. Again, Monroe County single family data at a 5% increase from last month and almost 9% increase in the same time last year. And our median sales price is now above 300 at 305. This closed sales data, this will increase as listings close out. That did close last month and people come back from vacation and start closing things out, whatever the case may be. But this number will increase. So we'll see a slight increase from last year in terms of what's selling and what's closing, which is which is good to kind of get us off that bottom of the barrel type of number, for the overall transaction count in the market. So we're not, increasing exponentially, but good to see that upward tick. Still 7 days on market on average, a median days on market. Still, we had a slight downtick in list to sale price ratio, but still, near that 120% mark. Median per square foot, up and down, so not too concerned about that data. But, again, kind of, if anything, this tells you, well, what's it tell you? That there's, if the price increased 5% and increase, so I'm brain dead today coming off the holiday, we would have bigger homes selling, right? Um, but anyway, just prices are still increasing overall. This is where it gets interesting, is the inventory data. And to see, well, first of all, to explain the difference between new listings and active inventory. New listings is what hits the market over the course of the month, and active inventory is what's remaining. Essentially what hasn't sold or what's still on the market, as of the end of the month. And 15% jump from last month, which we saw a substantial jump the month prior as well. But this is where, this is where it gets interesting. A 23% jump in new listings from June of this month, or this year, sorry, compared to June of last year. That's a big jump. That's a type of supply side jump that, if it continues at that rate, the rest of the country that's seen, a lot of market shifting or balancing, this is the reason why, is that the inventory has jumped significantly across the board in a lot of other markets. And now we're finally starting to see that. Active inventory, however, tells a different story. So what came on the market at a really increased rate, both from last month and the same time last year. What's remaining on the market, it went up a little bit, 3.3% from last year, but nowhere near 23%. And it went up 7% from last month, which, keep in mind the month over month type of, data, right? From April to May to June, just keep in mind we're in our seasonal time periods here, right? So like we would want to see an increase in listings, for example, and want to see an increase in sales, for this time of year. So big jump from last year in terms of what came on the market, not so big jump from what's remaining on the market. Tells you there's still adequate demand. And even though we've had, a 6.7% jump in month supply of inventory from 0.8 to 0.9, it's still, under a month total. So there's still enough demand that is scooping up the supply, even at an increased rate. kind of leaving off the same place I left off last month with this update in terms of it's going to be really interesting to see what July's data shows come this first week of August next month. And did we have another double digit 23% year over year jump in new listings? And is the active inventory remaining and the month supply of inventory, still at not significantly increasing levels and still, very low at that, one or less month supply. So we've got kind of this, I don't want to say we're in limbo, but we now have a validated reason as to, okay, this is essentially what you're feeling out there, right? This the conversations that we've been having over the course of the last month or two, and what's going on in this market and all these past delays and less bidding wars and really trying to strategize around listings and really finding opportunities for buyers. This right here, 23% increase in inventory of new listings from June of 2024 to June of 2025 is why you're feeling that. So it'll be interesting to see if this rate of increase of new listings continues and whether or not the buying side of the equation can't meet that supply level. Right now, there's, yes, a good, healthy increase in supply, but the demand is still there, is what this data is showing. And still a seller's market at 7 days on the market, 120% list sales price ratio, and pricing increasing 9% from the same time of last year, and 1 month supply of inventory or less. So kind of, again, two stories. The more things change, the more they stay the same is a lot of what this data shows. And that's been what's coming out of my mouth probably, all year with these updates. However, we have a very, compelling aspect to monitor moving forward is the way I'll phrase that in how the supply side, continues to increase, or does it level off come next month? Did we already have our seasonal spike and kind of back to not having great levels of supply is what the market's been used to. Is 926 listings in a month is a big jump compared to the 5, 6, 700 mark. So if that continues, and especially if it continues into the later summer and in the fall, you can bank on a shifting or balancing market at that point. Right now, this is the reason why you felt what you felt out there in the market in the past couple months. Thoughts, questions? It makes sense. Here's a glimpse at the demand side of the equation. Well, partly anyway. Here's your latest Fannie Mae and Mortgage Bankers Association's predictions on interest rates through the end of 2026. So we are right here in, right at the start of Q3 2025, 6.8% level. End of the year, Q4 2025, we got mortgage bankers saying rates be just.
Jason, I'm not seeing anything on your screen. Yeah. No.
I give it a heads up. Better?
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
So where are we? We're right here, 6.8% end of the year. We got one prediction, mortgage bankers saying 6.7%. We got Fannie Mae saying 6.5%. Fast forward to the end of 2026, 6.4%, 6.1%. So just a reiteration of something we've been talking about for a long time now of, don't expect these interest rates to drastically come down, into a low 5%, 4% level anytime soon. I mean, here's the stretch for the next year and a half. So are your buyers aware of that, or are they thinking the opposite because they're going to see things fed to them in news headlines of, Fed rate cuts and things of that nature that sure, that'll happen. As a side note, to that topic, we had a very strong jobs and labor report on Thursday before the holiday that the rhetoric from that seems to be that the chances of the Fed reducing the rate at their meeting this month in July is all but zero. So now that puts September's Fed meeting on deck for what is expected to be a rate cut at that point. Are your buyers aware of this? Is that going to hold up demand? Or are we at a point now where we've been dealing with, quarter two of 2022, right? Is when we entered the 5% territory. And quarter one of 2023 is when we got into, somewhere at the end of 2022 and 2023, we entered six. And, we're going to go on 3 full years of it. Is there any adjustments that the demand is making and just, you know, finding a way, or is the notion going to be to wait until it drops back down to 3.8%? Because if that's what they're thinking, you got to step in and have a conversation. Talk to me. What do we think about this? What questions do you have? Like, it's, I just throw a lot of numbers and concepts. I'm not expecting everybody to fully grasp. So
I think that's good data. And the individuals that I'm working with, I'm no longer hearing anything about the issues with interest rates. I think it's more normalized at this point.
yeah. I mean, listen, that's what I was looking for, right? Like, are interest rates even a topic at this point with your people? Because if they are, fine. And it will be with some, right? Because there will be people that are, that are thinking, I'll just wait for it to come back down to 3%. And having that type of chart can go a long way to educate on what the reality is of that. Because if it's, I'm expecting rates to come back down to 3% the next year, and you show them that, and they still want to argue, or they want to argue at that point, at least you know what you're dealing with, right? Or if they're thinking more like, well, no, I want to buy 5 years from now, and I'm hoping they're lower at that point. Like, tough to make an argument on our end because we don't have the crystal ball. On one hand, I could say, like, look at, don't plan on rates coming back down to a 3% level ever again. If we do, we have a problem. On the other hand, who the hell knows? What about the local market data for us, Monroe County? Keep in mind, a lot different from what's going to be in the news and the national story, and a lot of other markets have shifted. Is there any questions as to this data allowing me to say clearly our market has not shifted?
It's almost like an anomaly because our median sales price continues to increase, but we do have more inventory sitting on the market. And I'm still seeing, I'm sure we all are, homes surviving.
Yeah. Jeff, the inventory sitting on the market would be this number, active inventory, right? And yes, it's increased in both, from May and from June of last year. It's just not a big jump, right? And it, the gap between the new listings and the active inventory, just there's enough demand to really to scoop it up. Because keep in mind, depending on the market and our market is one that's why, this month's supply of inventory, balanced market, they say 6 months. And now, it's kind of more of a range of like 4 to 6 months. Nationally, as the country as a whole, I believe is at 4.6 months supply of inventory. And we're way off. So like our balance or our shift to a buyer's market probably looks more like 4 months than it does 6 months. And you're really gonna feel it when it gets to like 2 months. But right now we're just, again, 7 days on market, less than 1 month supply of inventory. I get it. Like the feel out there and the individual noisy examples, right? Of like, this house passed delayed, this group that's, you know, listing all the opportunities that have passed delayed. And don't get me wrong, those are like that's the tactical type of stuff that has to be talked about and strategized on both for the buyer and seller side of the business. But that's, you're hearing of that for a reason because that's not the status quo of the last 5, 7 years, whatever, of the market of just everything selling in a week and at, high pricing and above asking price. So you're hearing that, but, here's the data, right? But if this, inventory numbers continue to increase, yes, this won't last forever. And the reason how it would change would be a extreme increase of inventory, and 23% year over year is extreme. So if that continues, like, yeah, you're going to start to see the rest of this start to balance off with, you know, an increase in month supply and an increase in days on market and, potential decrease in pricing and list to sales price ratio, things of that nature. Questions?
Do we think the days on market is going to increase next time we look at this data next month?
You want the prediction, huh? I mean, I'm surprised that it didn't increase this month, so that's what throws me off. At least slightly, like it go 7 to 8, 7 to 9, something like that, right? Um, it's going to be really interesting, especially when you factor in like, okay, we've had part of the month that hit during last week and a holiday week. We have part of the month that's going to hit this week, and if logic holds true that there would be a whole bunch of inventory coming on the market this week that may potentially provide that boost of inventory that kind of gives options to buyers this weekend where it's like, wow, there's actually 5 homes that I really like that I could consider instead of just one. That can be an element that causes things to not sell this weekend or next week after delayed, etc. And they got to go into a week later, right? And then it starts to push that days on market up. Yeah, I'd like to see it go up, provide that take. Like I think if transparent pricing starts to play out more commonly because there is more strategizing around the listing side of the business and more conversations that are playing out where it's hey, don't worry about it, all we got to do is throw it up online and wait for the offer deadline and that takes care of it. Or so the conversation is, hey, like we really got to think this through. I don't want you to get stuck. The other option is to price it where we want to sell at, and it may take 30 days. If that becomes more common, then that, by design of the strategy itself, will push the days on market up, will push list to sales price ratio down. I'm really like stuck making a prediction because the data from this month was very interesting, yet very much like, well, still the same stuff out there. Yeah, big boost in inventory, but everything got scooped up. still enough demand out there in the marketplace. Which is, guys, this is a good problem to have. Like, for those that haven't been in the business longer than 2018, which is most, just in the industry in general, know that, okay? Like you haven't been in a buyer's market. You don't want to be. Because combined lack of buyer urgency due to the availability of the market and the not not having a need to act urgently as a buyer does things to the consumer, right? Versus the need to act urgently as a buyer and like this house is going to be sold and so is everything else if you don't do anything by Monday. Like that creates a different type of behavior as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But make hay while the sun shines is my message. Because that buyer's market with the buyer side of the equation, not acting urgently, wanting to negotiate, wanting to, to get everything they can for the best deal possible. Don't get me wrong, that's great. They should. It's okay, but that's more work for you. Plus the seller side of the equation, that side of the business, and taking 90 days to sell a listing. It's a freaking nightmare when your seller's calling you every Monday, like, okay, how do we do at the open house? And what's the time for the open house this weekend? And what are you going to do to get this thing sold? And what are we doing this week? And why isn't it selling? And no, I don't want to reduce the price. I want you to sell it. It's a different game. You're muted, Joe.
It, there is some good news. I hate all do. I don't want to be doom and gloom to everybody all the time about this shift, but the good news is that if the market fully shifts, then everybody will be in the same boat. Everybody
Yeah.
will be in a buyer's market. So, and your sellers will have that mindset from the get-go because that's what you will counsel them at the beginning. It's no longer a seller's market. You need to settle in and be patient. We're looking at 30 to whatever days on the market. They'll know that ahead of time. So they're probably not calling you every Monday and saying, well, I just saw 5 houses go under contract in 6 days, because no houses will be going under contract within 6 days. Well, very few. But that's the difference with a full on buyer's market. It's just uncomfortable right now because it's a transition period.
Well, if we are transitioning.
Well, there are areas around the city that are transitioning and that have transitioned. So I would venture to say it's just a matter of time. And in the shift book that Gary Keller wrote, he says it's always just a matter of time. So
I agree.
may not be tomorrow, may
Yep.
not be next year,
Right.
but we should always be preparing for it.
No, I agree there for sure. Questions?
I would like to do Jess started one a few months ago and then kind of fell out of it. She started a book club for the MREA, but I would like to start a book club for the shift.
Hold up. It's a great idea.
So do I talk to Ellen about that, or
We can connect on it, but yeah, we'll get that going. Especially
okay,
if we have a leader for it.
start from the beginning, read a chapter a month, come in and discuss it.
I love it.
Maybe
Ah,
put together some playbooks to help with whatever that chapter is talking about, how to troubleshoot things like that.
sure. I love it. Yeah, and I mean, I think, it's a great thing. Like you start with the foundation of the MREA and the models and principles and guide, and, just everything that is. And then you add shift to that, and now you kind of have like the full coverage of this business, right? Because you have a foundational principle and guide, and then taking that the same stuff in there with, and here's what to do when things shift because they will shift eventually, and you need to act accordingly, right? So yes, I mean it's when I kind of lean into the data side of things, believe me, I'm not saying ignore uh the the feeling out there, right? And the stuff that's in front of you that you're dealing with every day. We just, we're in kind of a weird time right now, right? Where it's like this data that I just went over doesn't really justify the feeling. So you got to know how to play both sides of it. But yes, know what to do with your business as the market is changing, shifting, balancing, whatever you want to call it.
And the strategies that he gives us in that book are a great foundation no matter what the market is. So if you know them ahead of time, you're going to be able to react quicker and more
100%.
efficiently if it does start to shift.
100%. Love it. One day. Good holiday weekend. Back to the grind. Get after it. Bell's ringing. Go do it.